Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast is There Are Many Ways to Be Okay. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea because on June 30th, it'll be 5 years since my husband told me he was leaving me. And I guess maybe because it's the 5-year mark, I've been thinking a lot about that day. And I've also been thinking about how I felt before that day. And if I'm being really honest, I felt pretty okay before June 30th, 2018. I loved being married. I loved my family. I loved the work I was doing in the world. And then that moment happened when he told me he was leaving me. And I remember that moment so clearly. And I know I've told the story before, but when he told me, at first I thought he was joking when he said he was leaving me, then falling to the floor as if something inside me had cracked, something inside me had fallen apart. I wasn't thinking about maybe or uncertainty, and I remember feeling this lack of okayness, this out of controlness, like the life that I knew no longer existed. And I struggled, as I've spoken about before, and I've spoken about in my book, A Year Without Men. And it was only when the idea of maybe started coming back into my life that I understood my life could take different shapes and forms because the future was uncertain. So it's amazing as I sit here today taping this podcast that I once again feel okay. But if you had told me on that day, I never imagined not being in that marriage. I never imagined my family not being together. And so I didn't even have a picture of what another okayness could look like. But something about the experience really has deepened that idea that there are many ways to be okay because I am okay. I'm a single woman living in the middle of New York City. I have 2 wonderful kids. I own my apartment. I have a great job. I love the work. I love this podcast. I love my family. I love my friends. I went through tremendous turmoil, tremendous inner work, tremendous changes so deep within me. And I'm living a totally different life. And it's not about which life do you like better. Life changed. And I can honestly say there are many ways to be okay. And this idea that there's only one way to be okay, and this idea that life's not working out the way we thought, and therefore it can never get good again. The idea that there's only one dream and one way and one person. And that's the battle that we have in our lives. It's all about that okayness. Life does not promise us certainty. Life promises us possibility. So in those moments where we have those losses or we have those unexpected changes, if we have a good relationship with uncertainty and we know that life can change again, we know in the unknown there's hope and possibility. We know not knowing is the best thing we could possibly have in our lives because that means we could work our way back to feeling okay. We could work our way back to a great job, or a new relationship, or going back to school. There's always hope in the unknown. And if we know that in the moment, when something really scary happens, we could kind of say, wait a second, I can still be okay. If we don't feel it, if we don't know we're okay, then we can say, maybe everything is still okay, or maybe I could find my way back. And for me, that was the stepping stone. At first, I was so devastated that it was really hard to process anything. But as the days went by, I started to remember the maybe. And although I had no idea how I was going to work my way back to feeling okay, I believed it was possible. And we have to remember that sometimes life doesn't go the way we planned. Sometimes life doesn't go the way we expected. But it doesn't mean we're not okay. And it doesn't mean that life can't offer us something new. Even if we like the old life better, we're here. And because we're here, there's something in life to experience. There are many ways to be okay. And once I got that, that was my path. That was my mantra. That was my hope, that I would find another way to feel that okayness, to feel that solid ground within me, to feel that hope that I could achieve new goals, that I could do new things in my life, that I could live on my own, that I could take care of myself. And sometimes all we have going through the turmoil and the unhappiness and the pain is the idea of maybe. And that is why I talk about maybe all the time, because it always reminds us of the potential to be okay, the potential for hope, the potential for change, the potential for new dreams and new relationships and new ways to be. No matter how shocking, no matter how devastating, no matter how hurtful, that because you don't know what tomorrow brings, there is hope and possibility, and you could find your way back to okayness. And looking back, I was always okay. But in order to relieve the pain and the stress and the worry, we have to feel okay. And that's usually what's happening with many of us. We are okay, but because we don't feel okay, because life's not working out the way we had hoped, that's where the pain and that's when the suffering comes in. But just remember the maybe practice. Ask yourself your biggest fear. Then ask yourself if you're absolutely certain it's true. And when you realize you can be certain of nothing, start doing the maybe statements. Maybe everything could be okay. Maybe there are many ways to be okay. Maybe what's happening will lead you to something new. Maybe you will find your way. Maybe things can get better. Just keep going back to the potential of being okay once again. Thank goodness we can't know what tomorrow will bring. We can't always know why things happen. We can't always plan for everything. We can't always dot the I's and cross the T's. That's not how life goes. But if we start to get a sense that we trust that we could be okay no matter what, and we know that life takes many different paths, and the future is always filled with potential because the unknown exists, then we could find our way back to okay. And when you find your way back to okay, you find a place to stand. And all of a sudden the hopes come back and the dreams come back and the potential comes back, and you process the pain and you get another chance to make new dreams and new hopes and create a new life. So when I'm looking back at 5 years today, I feel so blessed. I feel joyous. I feel hopeful. It's not what I expected. And perhaps it would have been something I never chose, but here I am. And I'm more than okay. But it was my relationship with maybe and uncertainty that led me back to go back out into the world and try again. We must stay on the playing field of life if we want our life to change. You have what it takes no matter what you're going through today. Whether you have a job loss or a broken heart or an issue with your child or a disappointment in a friendship or life is just not going your way. It is just a moment in time. Yes, sometimes you have to process the sadness and the pain, but don't get too far from your okayness. Don't get too far from your potential. Don't get too far from the maybe. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that life won't change. You don't need your life to be certain. That's not where our best life resides. Our best life resides when we take each day, no matter what it brings, and we open our heart and we dig really deep and we're honest about how we feel, and we connect with our dreams and we connect with our true desires, and we believe that it still exists in the unknown future. But the most important thing is to be present in our lives today and be so kind and loving to ourselves on our life's journey. And we are more than okay to get back up again and look into the future and say, maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. And if you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe or A Year Without Men, they're available at all major bookstores. and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.